Throughout Metro Exodus are abandoned houses, flooded shelters, and forgotten hideouts, filled with journal entries of people who never survived the wasteland. Some of these stories are tragic, others are deeply unsettling, and many reveal just how brutal life became after the collapse of the world. In this episode of Echoes of Survival, we'll be uncovering one of the many hidden stories scattered throughout the world of Metro Exodus, and piecing together what happened to the people who were left behind. In a now flooded area, a lone house still stands, resting on a small patch of land surrounded by dark freezing water. Upon entering the house, you find it completely dilapidated, with parts of the floor submerged beneath the frozen water. When you step into the living room, you're greeted with a horrific sight. 8 corpses are scattered throughout the room. 2 bodies cling tightly to each other on the couch, while others remain slumped around the nearby table or half submerged beneath the icy water below. On the opposite side of the room, another corpse sits motionless in the chair beside the window. Venturing further into the house, you enter a small back room. There you can find another corpse hanging from the ceiling. Suddenly, music begins to play over a radio. But is quickly interrupted by the sound of a woman crying. Then the whispers and crying begin to echo faintly throughout the house. Your vision begins to distort, as if you're peering into the past itself. Ghostly figures briefly appear throughout the house, replaying fragments of the final moments experienced by people who died there. Sitting on the table nearby is a journal. The journal entries reveal that this house once served as a shelter for survivors suffering from severe radiation sickness. At first, the entries are cold and clinical, focusing on patient numbers, dwindling supplies, and survival odds. 12 patients, 8 acute radiation syndrome stage 3, 3 stage 4, prognosis in all cases is poor. Whoever wrote these entries was likely a medic trying to care for the dying with almost nothing left to help them. But as the days pass, the situation inside the house quickly falls apart. More patients arrive, more survivors die, and eventually, even the medicine begins to run out. 7 lethal cases in 3 days, earth hard as rock. I just put them all in the shed. The ground had frozen solid, making it impossible to bury the dead. By the final entries, only a handful of survivors remain alive inside the house. Only 2 tramadolls left. I'll put them both in Varia's drip. She suffered longer than anyone, but she never complains. Then comes the final entry. Today I was the only one to wake up. I did all I could. It is time. These journal entries ultimately became a record of the entire group slowly dying from severe radiation sickness. Trapped inside a collapsing world with almost no medicine, no hope of rescue, and no real chance of survival. A little south of the church, hidden among some freight containers, is what appears to be a small watchman nest. Among the abandoned freight containers is one made into a makeshift shelter. Once inside, you find a corpse slumped over on his desk with scattered equipment, chemical supplies, and handwritten notes. The journal entries describe a survivor who may have once been some kind of self-taught medic, biochemist, or researcher, attempting to create medicine from mutated fungal spores. At first, the entries are methodical. The writer documents bacterial tests, fungal cultivation, and successful animal trials. Mycelium is growing well. Control media shows normal bacterial colony growth. Test samples are clear. At first, the experiments appear completely legitimate. The writer successfully stops bacterial growth, cures illness in test subjects, and eventually begins testing the compound on himself. Noticeable improvements, angina symptoms eliminated, perfect health, no side effects. But after this point, the journal begins to change. The entries become erratic and unstable, and it quickly becomes clear that this writer is beginning to lose his grip on reality. He starts describing heightened perception, bursts of unnatural energy, and strange knocking noises coming from outside the container. Instead of stopping the experiments, he increases the dosage even further. Soon, the physical side effects become severe: tremor, shivering, vomiting. By the final entries, the writer is barely coherent, and he becomes convinced that something is waiting for him outside the container. They have arrived. They are waiting. Then comes the final entry. This is a smile. By the end of the journal, whatever treatment he created had clearly driven him completely insane. It's never fully explained what exactly the compound was, or what it did to him, but whatever he discovered inside these containers slowly destroyed both his body and his mind. On the southern island is a small archipelago with 3 massive silos. Nearby sits a small shack surrounded by a watchman nest. After breaking the lock and entering the house, you find a corpse sitting motionless beside a table, covered in scavenged radios, clocks, and dismantled electronics. Nearby is a journal belonging to what appears to be one of Salantius' followers from the religious cult. At first, the entries describe a man completely devoted to the belief that technology and electricity had become cursed after the collapse of the world. We have to not simply fight the demons of electricity, but get rid of all remains of god-awful technology that attracts them. The writer becomes convinced that the only way to protect the cult's sanctuary is by locating and removing old-world technology. But to do this, he's forced to use the very thing he believes is sinful. Using scavenged electronics, the man begins constructing a metal detector inside the shack. I have to go back to using technology. Lord, forgive me for this sin. Eventually, the detector begins working, and the writer spends days searching the surrounding islands for buried scraps of technology. Convinced he is cleansing the holy ground of the cult. With God's help, I was able to clear a large patch of our cloister's holy ground from all the vestiges of technological heresy. Then comes the final entry. While scavenging alone, the man is attacked by mutants and severely wounded. Bleeding out inside the shack, he becomes convinced his injuries are divine punishment for embracing forbidden technology. I didn't heed those words and thus was punished for this folly of conceit. You who would read these scribbles, do not repeat my mistakes. Do not try to fight evil with evil.